Hello, folks. Greetings from Amsterdam on this Saturday evening in the middle of December, where it's very dark these days. Thank you for showing up. This is a live session called Idea to Action, starting my podcast. So if you're new here, my name is Peter Akis, and I teach people how to be more productive. I do that in a variety of ways. I've got a few courses, one on a task manager called Things 3, one on a task manager called OmniFocus, and those are really sharp courses, really designed to teach you a workflow using either one of those apps to be more productive, get organized. I also have a course called Big Picture Productivity, which is a 5-week live program all about making 2021 your most productive year ever. That's relevant because the deadline for enrolling in the next cohort of Big Picture Productivity actually is in a few hours from now, about 3 hours from now. So if you're interested in that, you got to enroll very quickly. Anyway, for those of you watching the recording, sorry, better luck next time for the Big Picture Productivity course. Anyway, today I'm going to talk about how I translate a goal or an idea into action. And I'm going to do that with the example of launching a podcast, because I'll be launching a podcast soon. I've been wanting to do this for a while. And one of the things I often see people struggling with is having a dream or having an idea, a goal, right? Which can be well-defined or not well-defined, but it's there. And people struggle to convert that into actionable tasks. And if you don't know what the actionable tasks are that you need to complete to achieve this goal or make this dream a reality, it's very unlikely that you actually will. So I'm going to use this example of launching my podcast to show you how I set up those actionable projects and tasks and how I make a plan for actually making this happen. I see that we've got some people here. Hello, Nicola. Hello, Nomadics. Oh, I think that's Theo again. Hello. Hello, Robert. I'll be monitoring, by the way, the comments now and then, but I won't see them all the time. So I'll check in now and then with the comments. So you're welcome to chat, especially after I sort of demonstrate some stuff. I'll maybe if you guys have any questions, I'll answer those afterwards. Okay. So where am I going to start with this? I'm going to start in my task manager as usual. So let me just share my screen with you guys. All right. So here I am in my task manager, which is the task manager Things 3. Now, you don't have to be using Things 3 to be doing this, but it is my favorite task manager. Another very good task manager that a lot of people love and that I used for a long time is OmniFocus. So if you're using OmniFocus, you can totally do this. Things in OmniFocus are both only available on Apple devices. So if you're maybe on like a Windows PC or you've got an Android phone, I recommend a different app called Nirvana over at nirvanahq.com. Anyway, today I'm working in Things 3. So what am I going to do? First thing is, in my task manager, on the left, I've got all these areas. Okay, so I've kind of organized my life into a bunch of different areas. For example, admin stuff, course development, fun stuff. Some of this other stuff is fun too, okay, but taking care of my health, taking care of my home, etc. So I'm going to go actually create a new area, and I'm going to call it podcast. Now, I haven't really thought of a name for my podcast yet. I'm not in that stage yet, so I'll just call it podcast and leave it here for now. And I'm going to start by creating a few projects to work on this podcast. And so I should probably tell you a little bit about the difference between a goal and a project. So, and I'll just show myself again for a sec. So a goal is something that you want, some outcome that you want to achieve, okay? But it doesn't really say anything about the how. Some goals do. Maybe if your goal is like, I want to go running every day for 30 days, okay? Maybe the how is kind of in there. But projects are even more specific than that. So what I recommend to do is if you have a goal, and especially a goal that you've been struggling to make progress on, to actually begin by saying, what are the sub-outcomes that I need to achieve to actually achieve the big goal, okay? So that's kind of what a project is. So let me show you with an example. So back to things again. One of the things I need to do for my podcast is I need to get the podcast software set up, right? I'm going to need to have some software to record my podcast episodes with people. I'm going to need to have some software to distribute the podcast to people so they can download it on iTunes or wherever, okay? So those are some of the things that I need to do. So there's going to be some software involved. And I'm going to make that one project. And the nice thing about projects is they're completable. So the podcast will be an ongoing project for a while, okay? So that's why I'm making it an area. But getting the podcast software set up is something that I have to do once. So if it's something that you have to do once and then, it's over at that point, it's probably a project or a task, but in this case, a project. So what is something else that I have to do? Let's say I'm going to call this invite my first podcast guests. So what I'm going to do later, once my podcast is running, I'll probably create a project for each episode. So I'm going to go new project, and I'll probably do like episode 4, guest name, or something like that. Because each episode in itself is a project, right? There's a beginning, a middle, and an end. At some point, the episode is done, and we move on. And then in things, I can check it off, and the project goes away, right? But when I'm launching my podcast, I probably want to have about 3 episodes already ready to go, because I don't want someone to find my new podcast in iTunes or Spotify or wherever they're looking and only see 1 episode. It kind of looks amateurish, I think. So I want to have 3 episodes recorded before I actually publish it. So I'm going to create 1 project for the first 3 episodes, probably. So maybe we'll actually rename this and say publish the first 3 episodes. And by the way, guys, I've thought about this a little bit ahead of time, but the reason I'm doing this live with you is kind of to show like how this happens in real life. So I've only thought about this a little bit, so I'm going to have to be thinking a little bit as we go about how to actually structure these things. But I think that's kind of the fun of it, right? I'm going to have to figure this out on the go. So I'm actually going to create a subheading inside things, and I'm using the Command-Shift-N command for that. I'm going to say invite guests, and I'm going to say prepare for the recordings. Well, we'll say podcast number 1, episode number 1. And we'll have episode number 2 and episode number 3. Okay. And so for each episode, we're going to have to do some stuff. So we're probably going to have to... So first I'm going to say email 5 of my friends who I'd like to have as guests on my podcast, okay? And I'm going to be filling in tasks as we go, so I'll probably come back to this. And so we're going to have, in each episode, we're going to have to do some stuff. So I'm going to have to say, outline questions to ask my guests. I don't know if it's going to be interview style. It's probably going to be more of a conversational style, but I want to have some talking points. So maybe actually I'll say outline talking points, something I got to do for each episode. What's another one? I should send my guest some tips on getting good audio. Okay, that's something I need to do because I have a nice mic here, as you can see, but a lot of people that I'm going to have as a guest on my podcast may not have a good microphone, and so I want to give them a couple of tips to have a good internet connection, right? To have a mic that makes them sound good, that's not going to cut out and all that. So I'm going to write up some tips, and I want to send that. And so to send those people those tips, I first have to write those tips. So we can create actually a task over here in the podcast area and say, write up guest tips, okay? And let's see. We got to do a couple other things. We also have to write up a script. We'll write up scripts for the podcast intro and outro. Each episode is going to have like an intro by me and an outro by me, and it's probably going to be on a script, so I want to write those scripts. Let's get back to these episodes. Okay, so schedule a time to record. Probably the next thing that we got to do. And then after the recording, I'm going to have to ask my guest to send me a headshot photo, which is probably, I'm probably going to like have a web page where I'm going to like list my podcast episodes. And actually, that's another project. So let's go ahead and add that. So we're going to say new project. Set up a page listing the podcast episodes on peteruckis.net, which is my website. Okay? So do you see what's going on here? I'm kind of like just starting. It's really a mini brain dump that I'm doing. I'm just trying to think of what are all the tasks and projects involved with starting a podcast. And then I start organizing them into projects. And as I go along, I change my mind. I think it might be better to organize it this way. But by thinking through the steps very carefully, you're going to think of a lot of things that you might otherwise sort of encounter as problems only when you're doing it. But this way I can anticipate what's coming up. Okay? So let's see. After the guest sends me the headshot photo, I'm probably going to say edit the podcast audio. and then I will say publish the episode, like upload the episode is probably what I'll do. Or maybe I'll say export the episode audio and then upload the episode audio. Okay, so those are some of the things that I'm going to do each episode. Okay, so what I can do is just copy those and paste those under these headings, because I'm going to do that for my first 3 episodes. But there's going to be more than 3 episodes in my podcast, right? There's going to be a bunch of episodes. So what I'm going to do is create a project template, which is a project that already has all of these things, all of these tasks in it, that every time I schedule another episode recording with one of my guests, we can just work through those steps, okay? And I don't have to reinvent the wheel every time. I don't have to remember what were all the steps involved. So I have a nice project templates area over here in my things. And what am I going to do? I'm going to create a new project here, and I'm going to call it Publish a Podcast Episode. And so if I go to Project Templates, I'm going to drag it to Someday. Okay, I'm going to drag it to Someday because I want this. This is a template project, so I don't want it to show up as being available to work on right now. We're going to duplicate this project every time there's actually an episode. And I'm just going to paste in those steps that we just came up with. So after these first 3 episodes are done, what I'm going to do every time I record a new episode is I'm just going to duplicate this project. I'm actually going to just go Command-C, Command-V, and then I'll have another one. Drag it out here so it's not Someday. Drag it under Podcast, the podcast area, and then I'll rename it like Podcast Episode John Doe. All right, so that's how I'm going to do it. And then I'm going to run through these things, and eventually they'll be done, and I'll click it, and it'll disappear again from my sidebar. So that's how we're going to do it. Okay. Now, one thing that I find really helpful is actually looking at how we're going to do these tasks a little bit. So I want to have a really complete record in my task manager, in things in this case, of the tasks that I want to do. It's not going to be a perfect record, okay, but I want to have a pretty good sense of what's involved because it allows me to anticipate. And the more clarity that you can create for your own project on how exactly you're going to do the thing that you're, wanting to do, right, achieve your goal, the better. So I already know I'm going to use the software Transistor. So I'll pull up the website for Transistor. It's at transistor.fm. And they have a nice page that says how to start a podcast, okay? And it has some steps. It says 5 steps. Funny. And so I'm going to just read through this a little bit and see if that generates any ideas for me for tasks that I need to add to my projects in my task manager. So they say the first step, buy recording equipment. I got my mic right here. I think I'm set. Choose your audio editing software. That is such a good point because I've actually never edited audio before as far as I know. Like I'm always editing videos. And so people suggest using GarageBand for this. So if I click this, it will scroll down and it'll say, looks like this link is not good. Best podcast editing software. Yep, so they recommend GarageBand if you're on a Mac, okay? So I have GarageBand installed. But that reminds me, I don't know how GarageBand works. So one thing I'm going to need to do is I'm going to have to learn how to use GarageBand. Now, I could say learn how to use GarageBand. But that is a pretty vague, broad statement for a task. So I'm actually going to try to make it a little bit more specific. So instead, what I'll probably do in reality to learn how to use GarageBand, right? Watch a GarageBand intro video for podcasting on YouTube. So I'm probably going to go to YouTube and search like GarageBand intro video. So why don't we actually do this right now? YouTube. GarageBand podcast editing. How to edit and export a podcast in GarageBand. There we go. That sounds great. I want to watch this. How to record an... Oh, this is Pat Flynn. You see, I love Pat Flynn. So we're going to do Pat Flynn's video. Copy the link location, go back to my task and things, and I'm just going to paste that in here. Okay. What I'll probably do is create a separate project. And that project is going to be called... can I do it in here? Okay, yeah, I have a nice idea. So we're going to actually split this into separate projects. This project is going to be practice. I'm going to call it Prepare for My First Podcast Recording. That's actually what I'm going to call it. And so I'm going to drag it in here because there's going to be other tasks that are related to for my first podcast recording. There's going to be some other things that I really want to do before recording the first episode, I think, okay? And so one of them is going to be watching this GarageBand video. Now, earlier, we had this invite guests subheading for the first 3 episodes. I want to make that its own project. So I'm going to say invite guests for the first 3 episodes. And I will go back here and just drag that in there, delete this one. So you see how I'm kind of adjusting these projects on the fly as I'm thinking of more things to do. And you'll see also that under the podcast area, I've already got 5 projects set up. And that's very normal. There may end up being more. So projects really are these small units of things that you do, related tasks that you do that contribute to a joint outcome. And mastering, the skill of defining projects is so helpful because it gives you so much clarity on what to do. And I can also drag them into the correct order, right? So usually what I do is I'll actually drag them into the order that I'm kind of planning to work on them. So first thing I'll do probably is invite guests. Then I'll kind of do the things that I really need to do before doing the first podcast recording. And maybe I'll even get the software set up first. Let's see. And then I'm going to publish those episodes. Then I'm going to set up a page on my website for them, and then I'll publish them. So this is kind of how I'm going to do it. Okay, get the podcast software set up. Includes sign up for Transistor. Okay, back to the Transistor website, because that's where I was at. And it said, choose your audio editing software, which is great. I made a task to watch a GarageBand intro video. Okay, publish your podcast. That's just going to be them telling me to sign up for Transistor, which I'll do. Submit it to Apple Podcasts and Spotify. So I've never done this before. Now, fortunately, my girlfriend has a podcast as well. By the way, quick plug, it's called So You Want to Be a Data Scientist? It's for people who are interested in becoming a data scientist. So if that's you want to check that out. It's pretty simple. It's at soyouwanttobeadatascientist.com. And it's also the name of the podcast, so very easy to find. Anyway, I kind of know how these things work because I've seen her do it, but at the same time, I'd like to walk through it myself a little bit. So what I might do is create a task here, just kind of a software task. Publish a test episode. Or maybe create a test episode and upload it. How about that? Because I probably don't want to publish it. It'd be kind of weird if you guys see my test episode. But I just kind of want to walk through the steps. Like, what does it look like actually submitting it to iTunes, to Google Play, and to Spotify and all that stuff. Promote your podcast. That's such a good point. So, obviously, after I record a podcast episode and publish it, people need to know about it, right? And so, in that project template that we made, let's go ahead and edit this. The beautiful thing, by the way, about project templates is they're living things. So you create a project template once initially with some of the steps that you think your project is going to include each time. But then as you're working in one copy of that project template, you may realize, hey, you know what? Like I could make a little improvement to this. There's actually a step that I forgot. And so in this case, that's what's going on. So I'm going to add another task to my template. And so whenever you're using project templates and you come up with an improvement for your template, make sure that you make that improvement both in sort of the copy that you're working in as well as in the master template, right? Share the episode. And for me, that involves share on Twitter, share on LinkedIn, share with my guest, and share on the BPP community. So I run a small community for some of my students called the Big Picture Productivity Community. If you join my course, by the way, it includes access to the community. And I'm probably going to be sharing the episodes with people in there too. So I'll just create a post. It's a discussion forum, so I'll create a post there. Cool. Now let's remember to get this task, copy it, and go to the first 3 episodes. Which one was it? This one? No, this one. And just paste that at the bottom. Okay. That's pretty simple. Now, what I like to do is I'm actually going to sign up for Transistor right now because I like to, when I'm planning something out, kind of do the just a tiny bit of the project. Don't get sucked into it right away because I'm in the planning stage right now. But by doing just a tiny, tiny, tiny bit, it can really help with completing that list of tasks that you think you're going to have to work on. Okay, so we're going to sign that up, and I guess I'm going to have to change my password soon. What? Oh, sign up. There we go. I don't know if I want to enter this info right now. Let's just do it. Peter@peterarchis.net. We'll use a password. Yes, and the credit card number. Kaboom. All right, guys, don't steal my credit card. Thank you very much. All right. Welcome to Transistor. Now, what have we got here? We've got add your first show, create a brand new one, create a new podcast, import, configure a new podcast. We're going to let the Peter Aki Show. I don't know if that's going to be the title. But why am I doing this? I'm doing this because I want to see what are some of the things that I'm going to have to think about so that I can go back to my task manager, okay, and create tasks for those things. So I'm going to have to give a description, and we'll do that later. Artwork, episodic, I got to set categories and stuff. Show owners, Peter Akis. My email is this. My website is peterakis.net. Creator is also Peter Akis. Create my show. Okay. So what's... I see integrations... So it integrates with ConvertKit. I don't know what that does. See, but the reason that I'm looking at this right now is because this gives me ideas. So, for example, I see that there's a connection with ConvertKit. What am I going to do? I'm going to go back to my task manager, and I'm actually going to create a task that says, figure out what the Transistor ConvertKit integration does. You get what I'm saying? Okay, this is probably enough about Transistor for now. I would think so. Let's see. What other tasks do we have to do? Yes. So I'm going to be inviting guests, people to come on my podcast. And of course, we need to come up with a time to record the podcast together. Okay. So for that, what I'm going to do is I'm going to use an app called Acuity Scheduling. So it's actually at acuityscheduling.com. So I've been using this for a while. If people book sessions with me for like productivity consultations and stuff, it just hooks up to my calendar and like people can book a time. Okay. So really handy. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to say, create an Acuity scheduling link for booking a time for a recording. And that way, I don't know, it'll be like a 60-minute reservation or whatever. And that way, when I invite someone to come on my podcast and they say yes, I'll be like, okay, click on this link and you can pick a time with me to record, okay? And so, of course, I'll want to share the link to Acuity with the folks that are going to be showing up on my podcast. So we're going to have to put that in here. We're going to have to say, instead of schedule a time to record, we're going to say send the guest my Acuity podcast recording booking link. That's what we're going to call it. So delete and paste. And remember, you got to do this in your template as well. Okay. So, if I have specific ideas for people I'm going to invite, I'm probably going to be like, invite John, invite Jane, invite Michael, etc. That's probably what I'll do. What I need to do as well is I need to write a script for an email inviting people to be a guest on my show. I think that's something that I'll want to do once, okay? Cool. All right. So I think we're done there. YouTube auto posting, Twitter auto tweeting. See, this is so handy. This is why I recommend, again, when you're in that planning phase, just do for a few minutes, right? Start with some of those tasks for a few minutes. Don't get carried away because planning is important. You want to finish your planning, but take a look around and get ideas for a complete listing of tasks, okay? So another thing I'm going to do for the software is I'm going to say, hook up Transistor to Twitter to auto tweet new episodes. And I think Transistor can also probably put a widget on my website where people can go to my website and listen to it in addition to finding it in whatever their podcast app of choice is. So I'm going to say embed, that's actually under this project, embed the transistor widget on peterakis.net. But there's more to it. So now that I'm looking at this project, I'm coming up with more ideas. Create a new page. Explain what the podcast is about on that page. Create artwork for the podcast. Embed the widget. So it's going to, publish the new page because I'm going to have to do that. Okay, that's probably a good start. What else do I need to do to prepare for the first recording? I can't really think of much else to do right now. Okay, let's see. What else is there here? Oh, yeah, it has an RSS feed. Oh, look at that. A distribution checklist. Upload artwork image. Okay. So we're going to say upload artwork, podcast artwork to Transistor. Choose the category, spoken language. Okay, that's easy. Analytics, I don't really care about that. Team, I'm not working with people. Not relevant, not relevant. Enable my Transistor website. This is probably like a dedicated website that they can host for me, which has my, that's interesting. I'm going to look into that. So I'm going to say, check out the Transistor generated podcast website. Do you guys see how my projects are already filling up with tasks really nicely? Just by engaging with it for a little while. Again, like I said, I deliberately didn't really plan very much for this live session because I want you guys to really see how this creating projects for a goal happens on the fly. You know, not with me having prepared it and having it look all slick and stuff, because that's not reality, right? Okay, so I just realized some other things I need to do. I need to decide on a name for the show, decide on a premise for the show. So one thing I realized is that I don't want it to just be like, Peter converses with folks. I want there to be a premise, something interesting about the podcast, like a way to structure each episode or like a theme or something like that, you know? So there's going to have to be a name and a premise and stuff. And it might be good to, how about this? Research what the length is of episodes of my favorite podcasts. That's probably a good thing to do because I don't really know, but it might be good to get a little bit of insight on how long people generally like their podcasts to be. I think it varies a lot. The podcasts that I listen to, probably somewhere between 30 minutes and like, you know, on the short end, and then like Dan Carlin's Hardcore History, you know, like 5-hour episodes, which surely I'm not going to have 5-hour episodes. Okay. So, I think we've got a pretty nice set of projects right here. We've got this listed. We're ready for the first 3 episodes. Going to invite the guests. Okay, so what I'm going to do now is I'm actually going to go over and see if you guys have been saying any interesting stuff in the comments. Alrighty. What do we got? We got a question. Oh, Daniel says, been meaning to message you, but things have been complicated. All right, well, thanks, Daniel. Theo says, why not publish the first episode when it's ready? I think it's normal to have only 1 episode. Yeah, you know, I get what you're saying. I think it's, I'm not really in a rush to get the podcast out there. So to me, it just seems fun to have a couple available right away for people. You know, just makes it look less new, I think. So if you're, if you don't know me yet, you might be like, oh, this guy has 1 episode. Like, this cannot be interesting. And then with 3, there's still that a little bit, but maybe slightly less. So that's kind of the plan. So if you guys have any other questions, definitely let me know. Nicola says, can your course be paid with Bitcoin? Thanks for the question, but no, it cannot. I'll need to investigate that. It's currently not possible. I don't know if that's a thing that I could set up. Interesting. So, thanks for mentioning the course, by the way, because one of the things that I do in Big Picture Productivity is work with people to do exactly this. Take a goal, something that they want to do, something that you want to do, and really break it down into a bunch of sub-steps. So there's not really like a formula to follow or anything, but thinking in terms of projects in particular is so powerful, right? And you saw me kind of like wrestle with it a little bit. Like, how do I want to organize my projects? And I'm sure I'll change this over time, right? I'm sure I will make some changes to like the literal projects under the podcast area in things. But how many tasks have I got in there now? Let me check. I know you guys can't see, but it's like 6. I mean, it's probably like a couple dozen. It's probably like a couple dozen tasks that I've got sitting in there. And that's so much actionable stuff for me to go through. And a lot of the time, people have a goal and they're just not taking action. And maybe this sounds super familiar to you. Maybe this is like, oh my God, that's me. And if that's you, then this is so helpful for you to do, is make a list of the very specific tasks that you can do to make progress on this, towards this particular goal that you have, right? And you'll find that by making that plan and then starting to do some of those things, you're going to generate more ideas for things that you need to do. And often once you complete just a few of those tasks, you've got momentum and you keep going. And, before you know it, you end up with a podcast or whatever your goal is, right? So that's the real power of this project-based thinking. And it's such a big component as well of my 5-week live program, Big Picture Productivity. So if you're like, well, this sounds great, I definitely want to do this, then go ahead and check that out. That's over at bigpictureproductivity.com. I'll just show you. Open my browser, share my screen with you folks. Just go to bigpictureproductivity.com, and this is what you'll see, and you'll be able to sign up right here. And we're going to start in January. It's a 5-week live program, and so I think that you guys may find that really useful if you're watching this today and you're thinking, wow, that was so helpful. So anyway, I'm going to keep it here today because I've learned that on YouTube, you better keep your videos short. People's attention span sucks. But if you got any questions about this or about the course, you're welcome to email me. You can find me over at peter@peteruckes.net. So thank you very much for being here today. Really appreciate all of you watching live. Also appreciate those of you who are going to be watching the recording of this. And don't forget to check out my courses. See you later.